Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Reno County Legislative Forum, the last one for 2026. My name is Deborah Tupel. I'm the president of the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce, and we are so glad to be here this morning at the Wesley. Thank you to the Wesley for hosting us. Also, thank you to our members who make mornings like this possible. AT&T and Hutch Regional Healthcare System have been longstanding supporters of our legislative agenda and hosting of these forums and making these possible. And also, we're very grateful to all of our elected officials who have made the time to be here. We do have one that is on his way, but we're not going to hold up the show. So we will go ahead and first of all, I would like to thank Representative Joe Seiwert, Representative Kyler Sweely, Representative Paul Waggoner. We will be waiting on Representative Kevin Schwertfeger as he had a cow that he had to tend to this morning, but he is on his way. It is Saturday in Kansas. And then finally, Senator Michael Murphy. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's give these folks a round of applause for their time. We appreciate all that they do for their constituents and our county and districts in this area. And we would like to just get started by saying that this was another historic legislative session. It's in the books. It wrapped up on April 11th for the sign and die session. And they had a 2-day veto session to consider some veto overrides to wrap up lingering business. And during that break before that session, Governor Kelly vetoed 25 bills plus over 30 line items from the budget bill, but after the dust cleared, 17 were successfully overridden with several budget line items. But I would like to ask each of you to kind of weigh in and reflect on this session, and most of all, what was the most meaningful bill passed this session of importance to you and your constituents? And we'll begin with Representative Joe Seiwert. Joe? Keep mispronouncing your name today, Joe.
Well, thank you for having us being here. Well, that's a tough question. My name's Joe Seiwert, and I represent a large part of Sedgwick County, and then a small portion of Reno County. But anyway, there was a lot of interesting bills. It's not.
I can hear them.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Am I not talking loud enough? Okay.
Hold it right up there.
All right, I always hate when they got that right in front of your mouth. Anyway, been there a number of years. The first session was in 2008. I'm not a career politician, but people keep sending me back for some reason or other. But it's probably the last 4 years have been the most interesting I've experienced in my whole career up there. We had a lot of bills, had a lot of controversy, had a lot of marches, and we had a lot of protests. But I think we did some good work, and we had a lot of controversial bills that went up and down. But one of the things I'll remember is the most vetoes in the history of the state of Kansas, and the most veto overrides too. So yeah, there's a lot of bills, but we'll let some of the experienced people here tell you about it.
Good morning. I just want to thank the chamber. I'm Kyler Sweely. I serve the 102nd district, so I serve the Hutch city limits, but the southern half, so everything pretty much south of 17th Avenue. My favorite bill, or the thing that I think is the most important, is one that Paul and I worked together with the chamber on getting done. House Bill 2596. It is to allow Kansas Correctional Industries to partner with an outside group to do modular and manufactured housing for low-income areas like Hutchinson, and hopefully so we can get some developers out to places like Hutchinson and some of the smaller places in Kansas instead of just Wichita and Johnson County. So the chamber worked really hard on that, and Paul and I worked really hard, and then we had help of obviously the other three gentlemen up here, so it was a really good thing, and I'm super excited about it. So now we're trying to work on getting that actual partnership with the company to partner with Kansas Correctional Industries and hopefully get some houses built that are in a price point that folks in Hutchinson can afford.
Grab this one. That is a very good question. I would highlight what Kyler mentioned as far as just being of local interest, partly because the bill faced some, significant opposition. We did have the mobile home industry fighting against it because they had gotten this carve out 15 years ago, which really makes no sense if you start looking at the details. But as far as just sort of being of local interest, that was definitely something. I would kind of highlight two things, just partly as far as my own personal involvement was the first one was the bill regarding cities, counties, school districts, as far as when they're involved, are that they cannot use public money for any involvement on constitutional issues or other local issues that are before the electors. Of course, that was kind of spurred on. Hutchinson, we had sort of a famous situation here for the bond issue that was killed last year, where you had the district literally spending money. I mean, supposedly it was to educate the voters, but it was sort of a slippery slope as to what was really being done. And, the bill, it had a good hearing in House elections, past elections, then passed the House like 96 to 26. Going over to the Senate, and it's a good example of just where things don't always happen. It was going to be put in a conference committee, and then it kind of got yanked at the last minute for sort of odd reasons. But it was up very close. Of course, the only problem would have been, even if it would have gotten the conference committee report, that conference committee report would have gotten vetoed because the other parts of it got vetoed without it, and we didn't have the bill enough votes to override the governor's veto. But secondarily, I will say, there was a bill, it was on PBM reform, which is pharmacy benefit managers. And my very first year in Topeka in 2019, that was the biggest hearing. I was in House Insurance, and it was just shocking to me, being totally unfamiliar with the issue. You literally had, a entire committee hearing strictly for the proponents, an entire committee hearing strictly for the opponents. And it really generates a question about how drug pricing is done. There is something called a pharmacy benefit manager that's kind of a middleman that, 40, 50 years ago was more just kind of a clerical, did some of the paperwork, but over time they've really exerted a ton of power. They are able to sort of spread the difference on the price between what the insurers pay and what the consumers pay or the drugstores pay, and they've done very well for themselves. It's created a lot of pushback, but again, they push back on the pushback. It's their cash cow. They don't want to lose it. But again, the bill did finally come up. A minor version 2 or 3 years ago, but it was something where House leadership, or the Speaker of the House, was actually kind of very much against it, but he was willing to let it go for a vote. And to his credit, the House, it was like 100 to 11. And the House Speaker was one of the 11, and that just is so rarely done. But again, you did have people from Hutchinson would come up from the various drugstores and kind of help explain it. There was a ton of lobbying on both sides of the aisle. I've literally could hardly think of a bill in the last 8 years that has had that many people coming to talk to us individually. But at the end of the day, it did pass both the House and Senate, and has now been signed into law. But that was being very much involved with it, both advocating for it on the committee level and also on the House floor.
Yeah, thanks. Mike Murphy, District 34, Senate District, which is all of Reno, Kingman, and Barber County, so all the way down to Oklahoma. Paul took one of my things, the PBM, that's fine. The PBM reform was something that we started on last year. Was a big deal. The other thing we started on last year was to try to address the problems with the 340B drug program. Both of those very important for rural Kansas. We did what Paul said. We did get PBM reform through. The other one did not. Once again, the speaker decided. I have problems with whether you're looking at the national level or state level or whatever. When one person has the power to block something, I think that's wrong. And so we need to. A lot of pressure was put on them. In fact, they gavelled out, I think, about a day and a half early, just to avoid being run over by it. The school cell phone ban was a big deal that we got through. I think that's going to help a lot. Then let's see. Oh, and I was going to just address briefly on the deal Paul was talking about for the local entities like schools and stuff, sort of advertising on their position. It's interesting that there was a senator from the eastern part of the state had the exact same issue that happened in their community, and unbeknownst to each other, they both requested a bill. So actually, we had a bill running through the Senate at the same time as the House did, and you never know when you get everybody in the room. You know, you look at something and you talk with several people together, and everybody goes and agrees, this is great, we just need to take care of this. And then you get out there and somebody throws their ink in it. and so you end up with that. So anyway, overall, a pretty good year with some disappointments.
Thank you, Senator Murphy, and Representative Schwertfeger, welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad you made it. I hope the cow's okay.
Yes,
You got it wrangled or nursed back to health, I don't know which.
we paired up and we worked about 45 yesterday. And we've got a few that I'm not sure if we paired correctly, so we'll find that out later today. But we got them worked. We had an issue with the chute. I had to get the torch out. We had a cow that was stuck in the chute, so we had to cut my nice chute in pieces. So
Well, first
got the
things
cow
first.
out, and the cow is doing well. But that was yesterday. And the cow survived, doing fine.
Okay, well, I'll restate the question for you. The others have all answered. So after the dust has cleared from this legislative session, what was the most meaningful bill passed this session of importance to you and your constituents?
It's hard to say just one. I'll say two. For my constituents, I believe the best one that I was involved with, I was happy to be part of the 84, that we needed 84 votes to accomplish, to bring to you as voters to get to decide how we select our Supreme Court justices. And we are bringing that to you to vote on, as direct elections would allow, should you choose to do that or not, rather than the current appointed process that we do, that we could refer to as the Missouri process. To give you a very short history lesson, the first 99 years of our statehood, we as the people of Kansas did vote directly to decide who our Supreme Court justices are. And then there was some kind of issue in the 50s before me where they changed to have a board of attorneys, 5 of those, and another 4 committee people select from a pool of potential candidates. And the governor has some input as well. And from that pool, they select who could be nominees and move forward in bringing a couple to the governor, and they choose. And so it's a narrower process than if we allowed you as Kansans to decide who to elect as your Supreme Court justices. And of course, we do have retention votes but usually no one knows anything about our Supreme Court justices because they're impartial. So through the election process, if this was to proceed, and we would decide whether in geographic regions, most likely, the court justices would come to be on a ballot. They would have to present themselves as candidates in these potential direct elections, so that, and I think the whole process would be an improved process because we're involving more Kansans as democracy allows, for you to decide your Supreme Court justices. I think it's a good principle for direct elections, for democracy to occur. And so we brought that to you to decide as voters. We didn't decide it on our own. We brought it to you to decide whether to leave it the same or change it so that you can pick. The other one I just to mention, we had a bill to increase the penalty for the theft of agricultural items, for the theft of cattle, horses, equipment, for the theft of grain and hay. Basically, it's before this becomes a law, and now the governor signed our bill. In the past, we had testimony from the KBI, Cattle Investigation of Theft Unit, who spoke on behalf of a poor Southeast Kansas farmer who had I believe, over 100 head of cattle stolen. And this fellow they caught that did it, had sold his cattle, sold the farmer's cattle that he had received by theft. And it went to a trial. And they found the guy guilty that they caught. But the judge only gave him probation. And this was appalling to me, that pretty profitable business to steal someone's cattle, and I don't know how you recover if you're an elderly or anyone from your cattle being stolen. And currently they're rather expensive. Used to be maybe a baby calf would bring $200 at the sale. Now they're $1,000 plus. And it's, yeah, so it's a lucrative thing.
Which bill number was that?
That was originally two different bills. One of them was 2422, and it ended up being 2413, where we combined everything and combined other things with it. You got to see how the legislative process worked.
All right, thank you on that topic.
It was a unanimous vote. When we were done, it was great. Everyone in the House voted in favor. Everyone in the Senate voted in favor. The governor signed it. It was a fun thing to do.
Very good.
Thank you for letting me do that.
Kevin, it's Joe, you had a comment on the previous topic about the Supreme Court judges?
Well, no, actually, I was gonna say, since I heard everybody's, what theirs was, I wanted to say what mine's important to me to Bill.
Okay,
Just take a brief moment on that.
go right ahead. And we'll probably try to keep each topic limited to about 2 minutes each.
Okay. One of the most important bills that we have, and it wasn't really did anything, but I'm on the water committee. And I want to say that there's a lot of things that are important in the state of Kansas. You know, we talk about roads, we talk about data centers, we talk about renewable energy. But we overlook the fact that water is the most important thing we have in the state of Kansas. And if we contaminate our water, if we lose it, we have nothing. Where are you going to get it? And I have several constituents that have lost their water supply at their houses now. They can't find water. We've over-drilled it. We're deep. We've dropped aquifer. Cheney Lake's in my district, got Wichita. And just in the closing, water is important to the people in Wichita just as important as they are to a farmer. I'm a farmer, but I'm a conservation farmer, and we have to save our water, otherwise we have nothing. But people have no idea. We appropriated the last 4 years $30 to $50 million to study it. We've already know what's going on. We've done it for 20 years. But I just want to let you know that if we run out of water, that's the most important thing on my list. And I've been in not happy, or I've been not in favor with some lobbyists because of what I do, but I'd be happy to talk to you. And I believe every person in the state of Kansas has the right to water as 20% of the people that use the 90% of it. So that's what I want to say. That's what's important to me. If you can't drink water, you can't have nothing.
Thank you, Joe. So we've had about 3 questions submitted of similar nature on this topic. After Governor Kelly vetoed a large number of line items from the budget this year, the legislature still sought to override a wide range of line item vetoes. Among the most notable was the legislative branch budget, with criticism centered on the 4.4% pay raise for legislative employees compared with 1% increase for other state employees. So one of the questions submitted was, please explain your vote to expand pay by 4% and give state employees only 1%.
Well, I can explain my vote real easy because I voted no on it.
I never voted for a pay raise or anything like that. That was done before I was actually in the legislature. So that was done in 2024. In 2024, they actually made I don't know exactly what to call it, but a commission made up of legislators to actually figure out what the raise should be. And they tied inflation to that, and that's where the 4.4% comes into. But when the budget line item was vetoed, it was vetoed with the tie to the legislative branch. So either the whole funding, so it's either the pay raise tied to the whole funding of the legislative branch. So if it doesn't, the governor basically vetoed the funding to the legislative branch, not just the pay raise. So my vote on yes was to fund the legislative branch and to continue to support all the people that work at the Capitol. I mean, every single assistant, every single person in that building is paid through the legislative branch, and the governor vetoed that, and it was just tied into a pay raise. So that was my reasoning on that.
Yeah, actually, this is very illustrative. Governor Kelly was totally playing politics with her veto on, I mean, she literally vetoed the entire budget for the entire legislative branch, which if it would have been sustained, there would have been no legislative branch in the state of Kansas because there was no funding for it. I mean, it was just purely political theater, her excuse about the pay raise business. I mean, the thing was, Laura Kelly, in her budget that she presented, she didn't have the pay raise built in. She had pay raises that is sort of an afterthought, which again is totally bizarre, and it's just a whole side question on state budgeting. But again, the veto override was about the legislative budget in its entirety. Laura Kelly was just trying to pull a stunt, and I wouldn't give her any credit for it at all. I thought it was frankly yeah, it's like an election year stunt, and I'm glad she got her wings clipped.
As far as the budget went, I voted no on the budget. I thought we needed to cut more from the budget. As far as when it came to us later that the governor had vetoed the budget, just to speak to that, I had a note from our Speaker Pro Tem, and that I agreed with, and this is what he said as far as when the governor vetoed what she vetoed. When one branch of the government is willing to eliminate the other, it raises serious questions about the balance of power. Today's vote to sustain the governor's veto against funding the legislative branch Today's vote to sustain the governor's veto against funding the legislative branch isn't just political gamesmanship, it's a fundamental shift away from the checks and balances that protect Kansans. No matter your party, one should be comfortable with concentrating power. No one should be comfortable with concentrating power in a single office. Our system was designed to prevent exactly that. Kansas deserves transparency, accountability, and a government where every branch has a voice, not one where power is consolidated only at the top.
I don't really have much to add to that. The line item deal was, would have eliminated the pay for everybody. There's a bunch of people that work, there's a bunch of staff that's there year round, and they would have been unemployed. They wouldn't have been unemployed, they just would have been unpaid. So overriding the veto was sort of a no-brainer.
And I would just, obviously, when you hear everything, you start thinking about more things. But I would just highlight that it was solely an election year problem. There was many people that I've heard from the opposite party that voted against that, with the governor's guidance that told leadership that they couldn't afford to keep coming back to Topeka if they didn't get this pay raise. And it's actually kind of funny because the governor's pay raise went from $111,000 to $178,000 in the matter of 1 year. And if she doesn't agree with pay raises, she doesn't have to accept that money. If everyone doesn't agree with the pay raise, you can return it to the state of Kansas.
This one is more of a statement from one of the audience members stating that we elected you to lower property taxes. That didn't happen. What hinders the supermajority from working with Democrats on this critical issue? So this is kind of a broader issue of talk about the property tax relief bills that were submitted this session and then address this question. Whoever would like to go first.
I'll go ahead and start. Y'all know I tried to take care of it. My bill came in a little bit late.
Kyler, can you pass that mic down?
This one's the one.
It's the one that's not, oh, okay.
They were both doing it. You can try it.
The internet link is typing it out.
Oh, is that it? Okay. I'll just try to speak up. My bill came in a little bit late. I did not have the time or the resources. A lot of the data we needed didn't even exist. So we're gonna have to go out and, not create it, but go out and, it's stuff that's not normally tracked. So we gotta track that, we gotta find a way to track that. There's gonna be an interim committee that's gonna work on property tax issues. I still believe that we could easily get rid of our residential, rental, personal property tax, all that stuff. We can get rid of that and replace it. We just need to get the data in place to do it. There are people, of course, that are against the idea, and that's part of the problem. You've got 125 people on one side, you got 40 on the other. That's a lot of cats to herd. So everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people have their idea of what's going to work. And so everybody, they start with their idea. The way I approach this, I believe that as over the years, property tax started off almost essentially like your income tax. There was no income tax, and so if you had property, you were making money with that property. You had a business, you were farming, there was something, and so that was your ability to pay into the system and all like that. But as things progressed and we moved away from that, the property tax did not stay with that method. So we end up with a situation where now I think we were sort of like looking at about a third income, about a third sales, and about a third property tax, but we're like at 60% in property tax, which is way out of whack. I think we can do a lot of that. My feeling is that property tax, and especially on residences and things like that, is it's immoral and it's unconstitutional. And so with that in mind, I don't think we can just change this or that and everything and fix it. I think we abandon it and we replace it. There's people, think about, well, if you're gonna get rid of property tax, well, you're not gonna have any money, you're not gonna be able to have fire and bridges and roads and everything like that, and that's not accurate. There are $5 billion worth of sales tax exemptions every year in the state of Kansas, and about $1.1 billion in property tax exemptions. Those two things right there would replace all the property tax, just not quite, but very, very close. So these are the sorts of things we've got to look at, and we've got to capture the people that aren't paying anything in. We need to start bringing some of that in, and that'll lower the burden on the rest of us.
Yes. Property taxes have always been a big consideration of everybody. The thing is, it would be easy to control if we just enforced revenue neutral. That means most people don't do it. The county actually did that last year and dropped everybody's property taxes 6 to 7 mils. But again, a lot of people, maybe I can talk, can you hear me okay? A lot of, what happens when you don't enforce revenue neutral and your valuations go up 20%, those agencies get a 20% increase in their revenue and it doesn't have to be voted on. Where if you go with revenue neutral, if you budget $1 million, that's 10 mils, and property taxes go up 20%, that means you got 1,200,000. That 200,000 you could do whatever you wanted to with because it wasn't budgeted. Okay? And that's why a lot of agencies fight that. If you use revenue neutral, only thing that you could collect your taxes on is what you budgeted. If you go above 1 million and you want to go to 1.2, you have to run a bond issue. And people don't understand, it's pretty complicated, but it's not. And the issue is, just like the senator said, we give so many exemptions. You look at government housing, they don't pay property taxes. And that makes your property taxes go higher to pay the difference in what they need because they need all the service. And then you have different levels where they get 20% reductions, 80% reductions, or whatever. But the basic thing, if you stayed with a cap of 3% per year, like I was on a township board, we could not raise taxes of more than 1.5% mils. Otherwise, we'd have to run a bond issue to raise it. But we got an increase every year because the valuations went up. We didn't have to do that. But we did. It's kind of a nowhere go, but we were only like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year budget. But you look at some of these budgets, and I don't want to pick on schools, but they know, and I was on the school board too. I'm not a career politician. I know it sounds like it, but you learn how all these different agencies work. And the schools love the 20%. KSAB, which is Kansas Association of School Boards, was a lobby group for the school board members. And when the valuations go up 20, 30% like they have the last couple of years, they couldn't raise it. But they look at the millions of dollars, like the senator said, millions of dollars that they get that you and I have to pay for. And it is a property problem because most people, when they get to a certain age, they can't afford the taxes on their house. And mine, for example, when I bought my farm out south here in 77, 78, I paid $51,000 for 80 acres, house and buildings. It's costing, my payments were 15 years, not lifetime. And it was only $321 a month for 15 years. I'm paying $1,100 a month to live in my own farmhouse because they, yeah, I did it. I did construction work and I was able to fix it up. But now they're taxing me $1,100. I don't know nothing. And this is where we're putting people out of their homes that were retired and didn't have a lot of pension plans back in the 80s. They got Social Security, which may be $2,400 a year, but a month. But if you're paying $1,000 property tax on your house, you don't have no living money. And there's no need. And of course, there's previous governors that said, if you paint your house, if you put new windows in it, and you don't change the square footage, they cannot raise your valuation. But if you do that, and you look and you talk with the city people here, I talk with a lot of different people. I get to talk too much, I'm sorry. But if you do fix up your house, your taxes go up. So look at all the houses that people are not fixing up in Hutchinson. Who's going to pay for them in 10 years when they got to be torn down? The taxpayer. And we can't find affordable housing because if you fix it up, the taxes go up and then you got to raise the payments or the rent. It's irrelevant. We got to come up, just like the senator said, we give exemptions. Maybe the Chief Stadium. It's a billionaire that knows that. And of course, I voted against that too, so it wasn't in favor with the speaker. But again, why are we paying taxes if somebody's worth $24 billion net worth? And you know what the legislator told me? Well, they got expenses in that. And I said, what does the word net mean in front of that term? So I'll rest my case. Sorry, I get passionate about that more.
And I realize that property taxes have been probably the biggest issue the last couple of years. I voted for every property tax reduction that possible that came across my desk. I was super in favor of trying to keep local governments under control of spending. I think more government spending is not necessarily good. We spend a lot too much money, especially the local governments, and the state has a very, very, very small role in property tax. The state doesn't collect as much as people would think. You know, you always think the highest form of government is collecting these taxes, but it's usually the local government. And we can either do a valuation cap that failed, or we could do a revenue neutral that failed. So I voted yes at both of those. I'd do whatever it takes to give property tax relief to my constituents.
I would follow up with what Kyler said. If you look at the data, you know, property taxes is mainly a local level. It's, you know, schools, city, county. But it is the case that valuations, even in Reno County, in like the last 4 years, have gone up like 38%. And so when your valuations go up just dramatically, it's literally a historic increase, that it just makes it so easy for local spending to go at just a galloping rate. And the data, there's a booklet called Tax Facts that the state kicks out, and the 2025 version of it, it was shocking to me that property taxes, income taxes, and sales taxes both were about $5.5 billion in total across the state, all forms of government. In the next 3 years, it's like property taxes went up $1 billion in the state of Kansas. So sales taxes only went up $500 million, and income taxes only went up $300 million. You know, because we had various tax cuts, actually was part of what kept the thing down. But you know, people are really feeling it. You know, that $1 billion increase, you know, is hugely noticeable. And you know, there's state level proposals. Again, Governor Kelly vetoes the one that we passed that would allow for a citizen protest petition if spending goes over 3%, because again, it is fundamentally spending that's driving the whole matter. And in the end, what the Senate with the constitutional amendment, because again, property taxes are in the Constitution, it has to be amended on a constitutional level to make any difference in how it's figured. But in the end, I voted for that as well. It wasn't like a perfect plan, but again, it would put it before the voters, and I think that would be the best thing to do.
We voted to do away with the 1.5 mil levy that went to universities for buildings. That was the property tax part that the state takes. The remaining property tax problem that we have is that we have 20 mills that goes to support public schools, which is about 53-ish% of our budget. And then the remainder is all from local entities. And maybe you guys already know that, but just to review it. So we have increases in both of those every year. We have all kinds of ideas of how to make this better from different angles. We had the Senate's version, we had the House's version. We passed the House's version, it's before the governor, to limit the increase for the local entities. We did not pass the Senate's version. We had conference committees that I sat in on and listened to that process occur. I voted for every proposal that came to us for relief from property taxes, I believe, except for one. It's something we need to work on still. It's like we get an incomplete grade on this. I brought a proposal to our House tax chairman at the start of the session, which was supported by Western Kansas John Deere dealerships that promoted the idea of the idea of property tax relief through a two-pronged measure. One, to slightly increase the sales tax and use that in relief of the property tax, because everybody pays sales tax. The other one was to take away we have too many, just like Joe said, we have too many tax exemptions that are out there that people are taking advantage of and not paying taxes. And so then it falls back on the property owners to pay what we're short, and it keeps increasing. So through these exemptions, so-and-so doesn't have to pay tax, they don't have to pay tax, they don't have to pay tax, granted to them in the past from the legislature. The proposal that I brought, that I'm going to try to bring back, was that at a minimum level, they need to be paying taxes in a small amount, and even if we could gather a small portion, you could call that a preservation fee on your tax exemption. So that if each individual or business was receiving a tax exemption and they've contributed for a fee every year, $250 or $500 to maintain their tax exemption, that would be a huge amount of money that comes in to offset and decrease the property tax for everyone, because we would have more business, more people paying into the system than people that aren't paying anything currently. I was told that was not going to happen, that this would not be allowed. So that got shot down immediately. So people have ideas. We try to bring the ideas forward to try to make things better. What we did pass in the House was House Bill 2043. We passed several things, but this one is currently before the governor. I've heard that she may allow it to become law without her signature. What it does, it gives communities a stronger voice in holding local governments accountable to limit excessive property tax growth. It strengthens taxpayer protections by permitting residents to file a protest petition when a taxing local entity with its jurisdiction proposes a budget that increases property tax revenues beyond the prior year's level, adjusted for inflation using the Midwest Consumer Price Index, capped at 3% annually. This passed the House 87-35 and the Senate 27-13. This lowers the bar for the number of signatures to receive in a protest petition. 10% from the last general election. So, for example, in Kingman County, at the last general election that they had, 4,412-ish, I'm off a little bit, voted from Kingman County, which is in my district. So 10% of that, we'd need 400 people to sign a petition in Kingman County. to then have the county commissioners keep their property tax at 3% or less and not be able to go above that. That would be a way to contain the local spending. And so we approved that. I voted for that. I had text messages from my county commissioners telling me not to vote for that. They didn't like it. I did it anyway.
Representatives, we have a question on capers. Would you mind if we go ahead and move on to that topic? So in the last legislative session, House Bill 2500 proposed creating the capers, the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System Cost of Living Adjustment Commission. And this 13-member commission would study, recommend, and establish procedures for annual retirement benefit adjustments. The question that came in, and we're here at the Wesley, and this came in from a capers retiree here at the Wesley, that stated that it's been a number of years, this says 28 years, since there was a capers COLA increase. So with that House Bill 2500 creating that commission, what is the status of that commission and what is your position on cost of living adjustments for capers retirees? And we'll start with Representative Seiwert, if we could.
To be real honest with you, I can't answer that because I don't know the specifics of it. I wasn't on that committee, but that is a good question with capers and things like that. And where has that money been put into and taken off, you know? But yeah, that is a concern because there's a lot of money in that and there's a lot of people drawing it. State employees are concerned about it. It's kind of like Social Security.
And you may not all know the status of it, but could you address if there does come a bill before you to increase cost of living adjustments for capers retiree, how would you vote on a bill like that?
If there was a cost of living adjustment that was reasonable, I could support it. You know, the biggest thing is you get the best legislation money can buy. And I want to step back on just one other thing real quick to kind of be the same vote. Is we look at the property tax exemptions of these renewable energy things, and we ran a bill, or I did, you know, that anything that goes out of the state of Kansas to another state for their renewable green energy, they pay full taxes in Kansas. That bill never got out, and I got taken off the committee for introducing that bill. If you would look at that amount of money, that would help. That would help Reno County or Kingman County especially. They got large wind farms, but they're not paying. And I had a big talk a couple of days ago with the county commissioner that they're trying to get that too, to reduce their property taxes but it doesn't. It doesn't go to help the township. And like it was said, out of all the list on your property tax statement, there's only one for the state. That's for the 19 mills for school. The rest are all local. But again, it takes all those other taxing agencies to pay for all those. And that goes the same with capers. You got to have money coming in to pay for those increases. And if you don't have money coming in, the only thing you can raise is taxes.
It doesn't mean that I would sign a blank check or anything like that, but I would definitely think that, yeah, we should do something about the cost of living increase for state retirees. I haven't seen the exact numbers on what that would cost the state and if that would raise taxes in other areas. But with inflation going up, I think that it's very hard for our communities to live on a fixed income. And 2 years ago, the legislature passed income tax exemption on Social Security, and I don't think we've done enough for our retirees. So I would definitely be in favor of doing an increase for cost of living.
And this issue has come up, and I'm sorry to be kind of repeating what I've said before on this, but the thing to remember about the capers, and this is sort of some of the older capers, is that capers, back in the day, it was done as a fixed annuity. You know, there's annuities that have an inflation adjustment, and there's annuities that don't. And capers was always an annuity that did not have an inflation adjustment, which made it so your contribution level was lower, to get to where you would be on your benefit. I mean, so it's not like we're taking away something that somebody would have reasonably expected, because that was not how, the capers is packaged. And so in that sense, it's kind of buyer's remorse on some of this. I will say, again, the caper system has been like hugely underfunded, but now it's really in pretty good shape. I mean, relatively speaking, I mean, it's like 74, 75%, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, if you look at the tables as far as how it's going to progress, which we have been making the full contributions. And so again, you have a point at which the contributions would really drop, which I think, you know, maybe at that point you would really be looking about somehow changing the benefits, because it would not be so onerous as it would be currently to be adding additional benefits, you know, when you're still somewhat underfunded. But again, I think, and the reason the legislature is very hesitant on this, it's like opening up a can of worms. You know, if you say it 1 year, I mean, there's always been these proposals ever since I've been up there to do a cost of living adjustment for this year. But then you do it 1 year, then it's just every year, and then it becomes a permanent thing. And that gets hugely expensive, and it's beyond what the people had contributed to when they originally contributed for their capers.
I appreciate Paul's history lesson there for the new people. I do believe Capers is in a better position than it used to be. And just like Joe said, if it's a reasonable item and not a large increase, because we have to watch closely our fiscal responsibilities, I could support that. But it's a hard sell because our income seems to be limited, and we will do what we can, but we have to apply some caution to our spending.
Thank you. You know, like Paul said, it's a defined benefit. I was not a state employee, I worked for a private company, and I was told, this landing, I was told, when I first went to work, said, I have retirement and you're gonna have Social Security, and whatever you save, like a 401k or whatever like that. I was told, do not count on your retirement. It may not be there. And fortunately, I listened to that advice and made other arrangements. And sure enough, after 9/11 and my company went through a bankruptcy, they canned the retirement plan. And so something if I'd been counting on that for my entire retirement, I'd have been in deep trouble. So the bottom line is, we've always been told not to plan on just having Social Security. It's not going to be enough. And so these are the sorts of things we've got to deal with. Is, you know, we're in the mid 70s in funding capers. We've put over $1 billion into capers beyond what was normally goes in since I've been in the legislature in the last 6 years. So, and it's still about 3/4 fully funded. So if we were to give a cost of living increase, that would just go in the toilet. And we would have to come up with more and more money, and we would just be in a deeper and deeper problem. And so these are the sorts of things that, while it looks good, and while I feel for people, if you're in your 70s or 80s, whatever like that, and you're living on it, and that fixed number stays there, that makes it tough, and I feel for you. But we've got to look for the whole state and the whole program. We can't destroy the whole program just to help a few. So that's sort of the situation we're in.
Well, and in closing on that same question is, over the years, we've asked for audits of what's going on with the capers money. Where is it going? How's it being invested? How come your administration costs went up with computers? Everything should go down because it's all in there. And again, you think of all the people that, just like Social Security, there's money disappearing because there's so many people that worked 20 years, 30 years, paid Social Security or paid capers, and they died and they get nothing out of it. What happened to that money? So that's supposed to offset the cost of that and the increases. We can't seem to get those audits through the current administration right now to do that. And if we're losing money, we need to make some shifts in that, you know, but they'll come to the committee meetings and they'll tell you, oh, you know, it's because the costs went up and everything. Why? And what are you doing to adjust for those costs? Because you have a system to figure out how you're supposed to get it. And audits are important. If you've ever been in any kind of a business, you get audited to make sure your taxes are paid, but do you get audited to make sure you're getting the money you're supposed to? And we're finding a lot of that out, that a lot of money's going to places it shouldn't go. Is that a problem with the capers? Because that money was paid in and was supposed to be managed to make sure it was there. That's the question. Was it done right? And we can't seem to get those answers.
I would just add real quick, that bill you're referring to was introduced at the beginning of session and never received a hearing. So that gives you an idea of that there's not really a lot of desire to do that.
Right. It
Okay.
indicates certain people.
The next question came in online this week prior to the event. It's to all of you. Do you view tactics like announcing last-minute hearings on bills, only allowing proponents of select bills to testify, taking action on bills that were not on the agenda, and using gut and go to avoid public hearings? And do you view these tactics as good government? If not, have you spoken out against them?
If I understood that, the echoes in here kind of, it's hard for me to understand some of the question, but you're asking about.
Well, we've talked a lot in the past about gut and go as one of
Okay,
the
yes.
tactics, just bringing up bills in committee like last minute and only allowing the proponents to speak. What is your opinion on just some of the hurriedness? And it sometimes happens because this was a really compressed legislative session. So have you spoken out on that topic?
Oh, I've spoken out on a lot of things. But again, the answer to that question goes back to an old timer told me, you get the best legislation money can buy. Okay, so comes up a deal with this, and you get a bill and it's introduced. Under previous administrations that I had, and I don't mean governors, I mean administration in the House and Senate, previous speakers said every bill that comes across there is going to go to a committee and be read in and be listed. It might not have to work it, but you're going to hear it so people know what's going on. We had so many bills that were put under the table that nobody ever heard that were introduced. And this is what I think is discouraging, because if they're not put in a committee, if they're not having a hearing on it and gives people a chance to actually see what's going on, that's what's wrong. We tabled a whole bunch of bills. And that can be up to one or two people, whether that bill gets read in, gets in the committee, or you change the committee. We've seen a lot of committee chairmen get taken off because they didn't do what they were supposed to. I've never seen that before neither. But when that bill gets buried, just what you're asking, how come they don't get it? That's a good question. Who decided not to run that bill? That's the answer. That's not the answer, that's the question.
And I do agree with my colleague, Representative Seiwert, from the latter half of his comment. But to make a comment about the testimony, I think that's very not true at all. I've sat in committee hearings from 3:30 to 8, 3:30 to 7 o'clock multiple times just for judiciary, where we're changing one single sentence or one single verbiage in the whole or sentencing guidelines. So anybody that's a private citizen, lobbyist, lawmaker, anybody is very much able to testify as a proponent, opponent, or neutral on any other bill. So I have not been informed of that at all.
You know, this is somewhat of a partisan question, I think obviously brought up, but I think it is a very good point. I mean, the general rule of thumb is that the more controversial an issue is, and when you're dealing with controversial issues, people want the process to be fair. If it's not a very big issue, people are not, process is not such a big deal. But when you're dealing with the things that we deal with on a state level, I mean, people have very strong feelings on both sides of it. And people want, if it goes through the process, as for the committee hearing, to the House, going over to the Senate, have a Senate committee hearing, I mean, there's plenty of places where a bill can be reheard or rethought about, and things aren't so much rushed. I will say, I mean, to me, it's a bit odd, and probably the example I think maybe part of this is referencing is, when they did the bill on the biology markers on your, driver's license, the thing that related to people who consider themselves of the opposite sex or gender, that was done as kind of a committee gut and go kind of, in the middle of it. And I imagine from just leadership's perspective, it's, it's a controversial issue in one sense. The issue's been around for years. The same people come protest, ever since I've been up there at least. And again, we've had the votes to pass it through over the governor's veto. We would have had them again this year. I don't think it's really a problem to allow people, to wave their signs and, do their thing. Because at the end of the day, I hardly know any legislators who are really moved by them. They certainly shouldn't be. But my final thing would be, it's like on the gut and go. It's like 7 years ago when me and Joe would have been there. The House Democrats and the sort of, quote, moderate Republicans did a gut and go on the floor for Medicaid expansion. And a lot of it's just what issue. If it's an issue you like, you don't mind a gut and go. If it's an issue you hate, you're all against a gut and go. We had almost an attempt on the House floor to do a gut and go on the 340B program, which again, for those of us, who like the notion, it was like, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. For those opposed to it, it was kind of outrageous. And, but I will say, I think we've done ourselves wrong by being so touchy that we don't let things go through the whole process. And yeah, there's going to be people, but I don't think at the end of the day that's going to change the outcome of the vote.
In Topeka, I found there's a lot of political drama and a lot of political theater that occurs. The theatrics are amazing. So the gut and go business that Paul talked about, yes, that does happen. And we had one that was a gut and go, and the debate that occurred was 5.5 hours long. So it wasn't like we were rushing it through, and we had comments that were repetitive over and over and over and over, 5.5 hours. And it wasn't anything new that they were bringing. And so this is a partisan question. For the most part, we did deal with things in a fair way. It just takes time to go through things, and we don't have all the time in the world when we're up there. We have 90 days to try to get things done that the people want done. And so, tough.
Yeah, there's not much more to add, except that I'm just saying that the process, I don't necessarily like the process, but the process has its advantages and disadvantages. We've got such a compressed session that there's sometimes things that, you just can't get to on one side or the other. And so one bill that comes to mind is one that we passed last year. It went over to the House. They didn't do anything with it last year. They hadn't done anything with it this year. And finally, in conference committee, the House had heard it in committee, but it had not gone to the floor. But by having this process to be able to be used, we're able to put that into a conference committee report and go ahead and get to the floor. There's a debate on the floor, and then it goes across. That's the sort of thing where it's sort of an advantage to have that. Otherwise, those things are just dead. And so if you can't get it handled this year, now you've got to start over next year. So like I said, there's pros and cons to it, but the big thing is, like Paul said, if it's a controversial issue that's really political, then that's where it really creates the issue.
Okay, we have about 5 more questions in 20 minutes, so we're going to go through these pretty quickly. So limit your answers to about 1 minute. What is the current status on medical marijuana in Kansas, and what is your position?
What is the status?
Yeah, were there any bills introduced this session? Is there a status on any?
House passed it in 2023.
But now.
Yeah, so the House passed it, obviously, if you know, so it has to pass the House and the Senate, and then it goes to the governor for signature. So sometimes when it's a favorable thing, unfortunately, they'll pass it in one chamber and the other chamber won't pick it up, just so it looks like they're doing something. That was before my time. I'm in favor of medical marijuana. I think it should be, obviously, oh gosh, sorry, excuse me. what's the word? Restricted to a certain extent. I don't think that it should just be on the sides of the streets and public places, and I think it should be strictly for medical use as of right now, and then go from there.
I'll throw mine. We've been through this a couple different times. I think the more you look at it, the more you see it's not good public policy, and I would vote no.
I'm with Paul. I think that by allowing the floodgates open, we become Colorado. People go to vacations in Colorado, all you smell is that. So I'm sorry if it, yes, I do have empathy for those that might benefit medically. There are other alternatives, though. I think that natural kratom, that I voted against the ban, that we banned the synthetic kratom plus the natural. I think if we had a way to use other alternatives, that they could benefit from that. So it's a touchy subject, and I do get emails, and I do feel empathy for those that may need this. So we do have to study it further, but as of right now, I'm a no. So we move on.
Yeah, I would just say that we look at what happened to Oklahoma just south of us. They roughly have, I think I was told just recently that 80% of the marijuana that's grown down there is illegal. And they're using it as a black market deal in the Chinese mafia. I was talking to somebody about it. They said, oh, Chinese are into fentanyl. No, they are huge into the black market in Oklahoma. So when you open this up, do we help a few people, and then what do we create? So we've just got to be really careful as we proceed.
Okay, the next topic is on special education and school funding. It says Reno County schools support all special education students, including homeschool and private school students. The $6 million covers only half of the general ed funds that are transferred to cover special ed funds in Reno County. So were there any bills this session to address this, and what's generally your position on fixing the special ed funding formula?
I'm not on any of the education committees, so I can't really answer the bills that did come out. But I know that's been an issue for a long time, because there's a lot of funding that goes into that. But all I can say is everybody in the state, the county, the city pays property taxes to schools. Schools use that money how they want to and appropriate it. So when they try to single it out that says it's not being funded, it's being funded, but the cause. And again, everybody pays taxes for schools, whether you go to a homeschool, private school, or a parochial school, or public education. So that funding should be there if they needed it.
I am on the K through 12 Education Budget Committee. This was the heart of one of our long discussions. Last year, we proposed that to meet the 92% level, we needed to increase our funding, I believe, a year ago, $70 million, 74. So we had a proposal in our committee to increase the funding 30 million. And no, that wasn't the level of matching 92, but it was an increase. So how that process worked, that moved forward to appropriations, and appropriations took our 30 million committee proposal to the appropriations committee. The appropriations said, hey, we're gonna increase property taxes if you do this. So we're gonna say 0. So then it went to more discussions, and then they ended up passing it at 10 million increase. So we did get an increase. That was a year ago. This year we proposed in the committee a $10 million increase. We didn't go with a 70 or 80 or a 30 because we knew historically we had the same committees made up in appropriation, the same peoples in appropriations. It was highly unlikely that we were going to increase funding. And at the same time, we just got off the subject of property tax relief. So this is potentially going to cause property taxes to rise as well. A lot of our school districts have significant funds in their budgets of what's called unencumbered funds. So this is where they're having to fund any difference, and they still are surviving, still are making it. It's an issue that if you figure we also do the budgets for the school for the deaf and the school for the blind, we spend a lot of money there. That is not included in special education. If you figure that in towards special education, and 92%, which I've been told we're about 64% rather than 92. So we are covering a large amount, and this does increase every year, seems to. But we do take a hard look at this. If you figured, like I just said, school for the deaf, school for the blind, we're above 92%, but they don't count those. They don't add school for the blind, school for the deaf. So we're above 92 on special education. We're not, if you take those off. But to meet the 92, that means your property taxes are probably going to rise. And it is so hard to make everybody happy. So I'll pass the mic and quit talking. Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin brought up something I was thinking about, like you said, they don't, for some reason or other, they don't count the school for the blind and the deaf in that, but those kids are all on IEPs, they're all part of special ed. So when you look at the total number, I think it's $829 million going into special ed, and then there's like 220 million of unencumbered balances that schools across the state have. So the money's available. We just need to, I think that we just need to look into things, and it's like anything else. We're spending over 50% of our budget goes into education. Is there waste in there? I can guarantee you there's waste, because there's waste in everything government does. So we can't look at that and say, well, we can't touch it. I think we need to look at that and see if there's things that could be, we can spend the same amount of money, but spend it differently and spend it better.
Unfortunately, issues like this become election issues, and that's why every other 2 years you hear one party being way more vocal than the other. But the leading Democrat in the state of Kansas, Governor Laura Kelly, said, and I quote, "By fully funding our public schools for the 6th year in a row and increasing funding for special education, we are fulfilling our promise to Kansas students and teachers." This is a baseline budget. So if it's just, say $1 billion, and in 2025 we put $100 million in it, in 2026 the budget starts at 1.1 million. You can't go under that. So everything gets added on, and every single year it increases. And the governor, there's a quote this year that I've already read, but I can't find it at this time, but that the governor talked about fully funding public education for the 7th year in a row. And it's unfortunate that we have kids involved in this because it becomes an election issue, and that's what people care about. But we are fully funding schools, and we are doing everything we can to make the best lives for the future of the state of Kansas.
Another question submitted, and just maybe one of you can weigh in on this, and then we'll move on to our last question. Where are we on the high-speed chase bill, and can a provision be added so fines are tied to inflation? Are any of you aware of the high-speed chase bill? And if not, maybe we'll research it after one of the audience members submitted that question.
I'm not on transportation.
Is this the bill about speeding over 100 miles an hour? I have not heard anything about tying it to inflation, but yeah, I do see.
That was my idea, because they don't ever go back and refund those things, there's some fines, and if you put an inflationary thing in there, then you want to come back progressive if that gets passed. Which to me makes sense, that would eliminate that.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. I think there definitely needs to be stronger penalties. If you follow the highway patrol, you see it. I mean, once a week or a couple times a week that someone gets arrested for driving 120 miles an hour, 130 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour on the interstates and turnpikes, and it's really dangerous for everybody else. So I don't disagree.
We had talked about that for years on Transportation Committee when I was on there, and there's there's a 25-mile over limit, so to speak. But 100 mile an hour on the turnpike is a little different than 100 mile an hour in the school zone, or 30 mile an hour over the speed limit of the school zone. That's twice. So we tried to separate it out that it was based on where you're at. Like in the school zone, if you're 20 miles over the speed limit, that's going to hurt somebody. And that was one of the things, but it got through the committee, but it never got read into the deal. But it's been talked about for a number of years. But again, representing Wichita, they caught a guy going 135 the other day on a motorcycle in downtown. And it's amazing how they go that fast. If you go through Wichita at 70, you're backing up traffic into 60. But school zones are where we really wanted to focus on, because that's where speeding is really bad. But I'm not saying it's not important in downtowns. But again, going over the speed limit in the school zone, that's a big thing. And they had a bill that if you're trying to see if you're talking on your cell phone, you can't do that. And I think we passed that, didn't we? That you can't talk on you can't have your phone out while you're in a school zone or one of those places like that, or work zone.
Okay, we'll move on to the last question, and we'll ask each of you to answer this in about 2 minutes or less. So each of you are running. It looks like the representatives have all filed for running in 2026. What, in your opinion, is the biggest piece of unfinished business from this past legislative session that you will work on if elected?
Yes, I'm running for re-election. Property tax continues to be that. We need to work together, both Democrats and Republicans. I've not heard any proposals from any Democrats. They all vote against what we've proposed. So I hope we can work together. Have new ideas, put something together to watch our spending, continue to watch our budget, and move forward for the benefit of Kansas.
I'll say, as far as for the legislature for next year, I think the whole question, the whole school choice issue keeps coming up. It's very dependent upon having a new governor, which obviously we're going to have a new governor. But I think if you get a Republican governor, you actually can get some substantive school choice reform. Other states have been heading in this direction. It's a win for parents. It's a win for students. It's something I hope the legislature is able to do in 2027.
I don't want to beat a dead horse. Obviously, property tax would be a massive one to go for, but I'll talk about some other stuff. I'm running for re-election. I just want to continue to try to be the biggest advocate I can for the community college here, as serving as vice chair of the higher education budget. Also being the biggest advocate I can for mental health. That's a thing that means dearly to me, with losing friends in the military to mental health, and trying to advocate as best we can to try to help the mental health crisis. And then also helping out with tech in town with the IDD population. They've been great to work with, and continue to work with the chamber hand in hand on stuff that make people come to Hutchinson and expand business and get some economic development. So overall, that's a couple of things I was thinking about.
I've signed up for re-election, again, I don't know why, but people encourage me, but my priority is going to be, education, budgeting, property taxes, and the biggest thing is going to be water. Again, we've got to focus on water, and we haven't done that. And again, prior to some previous comments about bills not being, hearing that bills have been buried, I'll guarantee you bills have been buried in this last generation. But next session, we're going to have a new governor. We're going to have all new leadership in the House. And that'll be interesting to see what differences those will make in getting bills and good legislation passed, and tax benefits also.
Senator Murphy, you get the last word.
Well, I'm not running for re-election. Do I get to
No,
talk?
you do.
No, I plan to, but I'm still 2 years away. one thing that I did get done this year was sort of under the radar, so to speak, is I'm vice chair of government efficiency. We got our inspector general, we got him 6 more investigators, and I worked with an AI analytics company. We got an RFP for them. They have been working with the inspector general. When all this goes into place in July 1st, they are going to be ready to hit the road running. They are going to concentrate initially on waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, SNAP, and TANF. We are at risk for our error rate in SNAP has been as high as 10%, 11%. At the end of the year, if we haven't got that down below 6%, there's a $40 million penalty. And so the incentive to get that done is pretty high. So we're going to work on that. And then next year, I plan to work on that. Hopefully we'll have a Republican administration. It's hard to get into the agencies and do things because you don't get cooperation very well. So once we have a Republican governor, we'll be able to look at these agencies, because these agencies have grown in the last 8 years, like 4,000 or 5,000 employees. And are you getting 4,000 or 5,000 employees worth of better services? I don't think so. So these are the places I think we could make some serious savings and start making a difference.
There was one other question. It was really more of a statement about the Supreme Court justice vote. So on August 4th, 2026, there is a topic for constitutional amendment that voters will decide on the legislature's effort to amend Article 3 of our Kansas Constitution. The proposed amendment would abolish the Kansas Supreme Court nominating commission. People seeking a position on the Supreme Court would run for election. That was just a topic that someone wanted to bring up. Do any of you want to comment on that? I mean, one of you may have already addressed this earlier, but.
Yeah, Kevin touched on it earlier.
Democracy wins every time. We
I'm on-
should allow democracy to occur. I advise voting yes.
I'm on Fed and State. We went over this bill pretty heavily. One of the concerns with what we tried to word it in a way so we didn't have ourselves sort of hemmed in on a process. So we've left it open to the legislature to have a process afterwards. So once the state approves, once the citizens approve the fact that we can, that they will be voted instead of appointed by a commission, then the legislature will determine how that process works. And we believe it should be based on population. So the two things that are kind of out there are they would be picked, say, within a congressional district, or maybe like our state school board. Each state school board member represents 10 state Senate districts. That way, it kind of keeps them in a population area. So they might represent a larger square miles area, but they'll be representing the same number of people. And so that's a concern, because you don't want them all coming out of Wichita and Kansas City.
This is actually in the committee that I serve on. I'll keep it quick, but the only opponents on this were all the people that had something to gain from keeping the current commission. I don't think that there is a perfectly fair way in today's world to have appointed Supreme Court justices. Either you have the highest person, the governor, or you do elections, Senate confirmation, or you do a commission like this. But right now, it favors a political party, because you can appoint this commission, and that commission can vote for whoever they want. And it's pretty much just like the U.S. Supreme Court. You could be there for a very long time. So I thought the most fair choice was giving it back to the people, and the people voting on having the people that decide the issues in the state of Kansas.
I will say, oops.
It is a very big deal. It'll be a very big part of the election here in August. And again, it is literally how Kansas did it for its first 100 years. It's the most commonly done method across the nation, is to have direct election of judges. It's not a stretch, and it certainly is much fairer and a better, more democratically vested system than any other. And I certainly hope it passes.
All right. Thank you all for your time today. We appreciate you coming out to this Reno County Legislative Forum and all that you do to represent us. Thanks for the audience coming out. And thank you to the Wesley also for hosting us this morning. Let's give these folks a round of applause. Please partake in some of the refreshments in the back, and we will see you next legislative session.